Welcome to another episode of Just Elite. I'm your host, Christelle, and with me is Justin Cotler. Now, Justin is one of the most interesting people that I've read of, that I've been doing research about, and your history and the sport is just so fascinating. Justin, looking forward to hearing everything about your journey into this space and obviously the athletes that you coach. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, that's quite an introduction. I hope I can live up to
Oh no,
that.
definitely. Your history is just so fascinating. Just for our listeners, just a little teaser. You used to be an R&B singer, but we're gonna get to that a bit later. Justin, let's start off with the most recent thing that happened with you and your athletes. There's been you guys have spoken about it widely, but just give us a little bit of what exactly happened at the games, and the disappointment. But at the end of the day, it was actually pretty amazing and spectacular what Danielle Brandon, did after all the adversity. So just give us a little bit of an idea of what exactly happened on that first day of testing.
Sure. We got to Wisconsin from Las Vegas, and the first day everything was okay. When we first arrived, we got there on a Friday, and check-in wasn't going to be till Monday of the week of the games. And everybody seemed fine. Bethany actually got a day of training in that day. And then Saturday overnight, she started to develop some symptoms. We didn't know exactly. Obviously, of course, in my head, I was concerned and worried. But I think, for her, she was like, well, a couple months ago, I had like a 24-hour flu. It wasn't a big deal, blah, blah, blah. But the symptoms didn't subside, and by the time we got to testing on Monday, I think all of us were pretty concerned and obviously on high alert, especially because the girls had been in close contact with each other, and unfortunately, when we tested on Monday at check-in, Bethany tested positive for COVID, and I think everything then, the shit kind of hit the fan at that point in time, and it was just so disappointing. Bethany was, in my opinion, was peaking and really had a great chance to podium this year, and I mean, just an unbelievable year, where we were able to keep her healthy, and obviously saw what she could do at West Coast Classic, and so I think we were just really, really excited, and then obviously just obviously heartbroken for her. Mm. And then at that point in time, it was kind of like, you just had to keep your fingers crossed. And unfortunately, Kari tested positive 2 days later. So that was on Wednesday, the morning of the games, just prior to the swim event. And obviously, she had to withdraw at that point. And, I think it was a fluid situation. The games did the best they could, but as much as you can say you're prepared for a situation, I don't think you can be in that case. And and then of course there were a couple other athletes that tested positive for COVID. And so then it was kind of like, well, now what are we going to do? Well, now we're in isolation, and she and I are kind of off on our own pretty much that entire week. There's, if you've ever been to the facility, there's what they call the barn, which is where they used to do a lot of the age group stuff, and literally it's a barn. and so that's where they set us up. We had our kind of like own, warm-up area in the barn the entire time. They had medical with us the whole time. She was tested 2 or 3 times a day. We were isolated from all the athletes. We were isolated from the general public. When we walked around, we had to constantly wear masks. I think it was just a very high stress level situation, especially for Danielle. And honestly, she handled it really well. And I think, for Danielle, who's so athletically gifted, but is an emotionally volatile athlete. I mean, she'll admit that. She's kind of a roller coaster of emotions during events. And it's one of the things that we're working on hard, and I think for her to be able to handle what she handled, and a lot of people don't kind of know all the minutia and all the nuances of what she had to deal with. But it was a lot. And I think for her to be able to handle it the way she did, and then obviously perform the way she did, I thought she did extremely well. And obviously, it was cool to kind of see the community embrace her and her become a crowd favorite. So, I think now that everyone's had some, very well-deserved downtime since then. We're going to be back in the gym in a couple of weeks. Kari's really the only one who's back training, and that's because she's definitely doing Rogue. 100%, she's going to do Rogue. I think everybody else just kind of figuring out what they're going to do for the fall and winter. The off season, quote unquote. But obviously there's some very big events during the off season. So that's kind of where we're at right now. But yeah, it was wild. It was not at all what we expected. It was, it wasn't. I felt like the whole season was kind of building to this crescendo. We were really on a high after West Coast Classic, and everything was really flying, and then to have that happen was really sad. But you got to bounce back, and I know these ladies are super strong, and both physically and mentally, and I think you'll see some better days ahead.
It must have been disappointing for you as a coach. You mentioned that Bethany was definitely a podium contender, and then obviously Kari Pearce coming off of the first American lady to podium after I don't know how many years in 2020. That was also a disastrous year, with the pandemic. Justin, what do you say to your athletes? Obviously, Bethany and Kari now, that disappointment, but specifically for Danielle that now needs to go and perform for 15 events. What do you say to her? How do you motivate her when you yourself just want to roll into a ball and cry?
Yeah, no, that's great. It's a great question. And honestly, it was a very interesting week as a coach. I think Danielle, the levels of emotions. I like to say I kind of put my coaching hat aside, and I put on my emotional support dog hat. Like, that's kind of what I was. I told her I don't really want to talk too much about fitness. I don't really want her to worry about strategies and this and that. I said, if you want to talk about that, we can. But other than that, I just want you to know, like, I'm here in whatever capacity you need me to be in. Right. So if that's, if you just want to talk about other things, get your mind off the stress, and we can talk about, your track career in college, or this or that, or music, or blah, 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 and really and truly, it was kind of a situation where I felt like the best approach was to really just give her whatever she needed at any given moment. There were times when I really wanted to talk about events, but I could tell that if I did that, it was going to be counterproductive. There were times when the stress level was really high, and I could tell it was going to have a negative effect if I tried to dial in something. So we just tried to kind of play it by ear and keep her as emotionally level as possible. And that's really what it was all week. It was a like I said, it was interesting. It's the best word I can think of it, because it was unlike any other coaching week that I've had. Right. And I think it was very important for her maturation process. I think it was a very big bonding experience for the two of us. I had never coached Danielle individually in a competition. I had always, I had coached her, but Kari and Bethany were there at West Coast Classic. So we got to spend all this time together. And I think in a lot of ways, when you go through that with somebody, it builds a pretty strong bond moving forward. So I think that was obviously the coolest thing to come out of it. And yeah, so I like to say I was the emotional support dog for the week. So it's the best, I thought that was the best thing to do. Yeah.
And then Justin, who was your emotional support? Because obviously it's it's a roller coaster. You know, people focus on the athletes and their health and so on, but you are this emotional support, but you work just as hard, you know, building your athletes to this point. So how did you debrief yourself with your family, your wife, you know, and so on to get yourself to a point where you go, okay, wow, that was exhausting because I had to
Yeah.
be there for my athletes, but who was there for you?
Yeah, I mean, my wife and my family, my kids. My wife is amazing. She came the last weekend, you know, so that was amazing to have her there. And you know, the ladies' manager, his name is Cooper Marsh, and Coop has become a really close friend, and he was great during the entire week, just really positive, and was there to help, you know, pick me up, to help pick Danielle up, and you know, so Cooper was fantastic. And you know, during the week we had a medical assistant. Her name was Katina Thornton, and Katina was absolutely amazing. She literally became like part of our little trio, like our little family there. She um, was honestly as much responsible for Danielle's success that week as anyone. She really was another just incredible support system emotionally. You know, as a doctor, she knew kind of, you know, what was going on with Danielle, dealing with having to get tested 2 to 3 times a day, and you know, it was pretty cool at the end where Katina was like, you know, I never said anything to you guys, but after what happened at the beginning of the week and how contagious this Delta variant is, she's like, I didn't think there was a chance that Danielle was going to make it, you know, without testing positive. And
Wow.
she's like, so the fact that she was able to, she's like, every day I was praying for her, and I was so excited, you know, when she would get these, you know, the tests back, and it was negative. And you know, so since then, actually, Katina and I have corresponded, and you know, I think it was really cool. I think we'll remain friends moving forward, and you know, she was awesome. But yeah, it is. You're right. It was unlike anything. I really did feel like I was run over by a train by the by the end of the week, and you know, really did need some downtime, and it's been important these last few weeks to, you know, to have a little bit of downtime. I mean, obviously, you know, still program for a lot of athletes and for underdogs and whatnot, but just being able to kind of be out of the gym and not, you know, be kind of full bore towards an event, and you know, with kind of the stress level of the games leading up to the games, and then obviously what happened. It's just been nice these last few weeks to to breathe a little bit. So yeah.
This is what happened quite recently, but your career in the sport goes way back. But I want to go before CrossFit. As I said, I can see a beautiful tattoo on your forearm of a microphone.
Yeah.
Tell us about yeah, your upbringing, where it started, and then your transition from a very successful singing career into CrossFit.
Yeah, I always say to people, because you know, it's funny, is I feel like I've lived two lives. You know, but I was put on earth to sing. That's kind of the way I look at it. You know, my mom will tell a story of, you know, I don't know, 2 years old, 3 years old, and she was driving along with me in the car, and all of a sudden I'm singing Stevie Wonder in the back in perfect pitch, and she was just like, "What?" You know, um, and I think from a very young age, you know, there are certain gifts that we get, and it was just one that I had, you know, and so when I went to college, and I was an athlete as well. I played college athletics, and I sang, and you know, I wasn't sure kind of what path I was going to take, but you know, once I was done at University of Pennsylvania, I decided I wanted to become a professional singer and recording artist and make music, and so I did that pretty consistently from 1997 to 2007. And you know, it was amazing. It was volatile. It was, you know, it was a very different life. And you know, it's interesting is that I really do miss I really do miss you know, the creative process of making music. I miss being in the studio, and I miss performing, you know, in front of crowds, and moving people by, you know, the music that you make, and by the performance and whatnot. I don't miss the music industry at all. You know, that ultimately was, I think, the biggest reason why I left, you know, and why I transitioned into fitness full time. It was just becoming my a burden, you know, my life, and I felt like I was becoming someone that I didn't really like, you know, and it had everything to do with just the industry itself, and you know, dealing with the record labels and management companies, and the you know, the business end of it, and where it wasn't the creative side, you couldn't really focus on that, you know. And so yeah, I had a little bit of a health thing going on in 2007, and it really woke me up to kind of say, like, you got to change your life. And I had always obviously been very into fitness and athletics, and a buddy of mine who was an actor, actually, while I was living here in New York, you know, he and I started training together, and we started to really just, we kind of dove into functional fitness. So, you know, it was CrossFit. It was a website here called Jim Jones, which is a gym in Utah that where all the guys in the movie 300 trained, and, you know, like, just some really cool stuff that at the time was obviously extremely niche. And we started to coach this class that was midnights on Thursday night at the local Globo gym, and we developed this massive kind of underground following, and yeah, from there, you know, just got really into coaching, and started to coach some high level athletes, and went out on my own in 2010, opened up my own facility, which was probably about the size of this room I'm in right now. And then things grew from there. So, but I look back on my time as you know, as an artist, as a singer, as a songwriter, and it is amazing, you know. And it's so cool to, like, still have stuff that's on Spotify and stuff that's on iTunes, and people will, you know, they'll hear podcasts, or you know, some of my friends will play it for them, and they're always just like, no way, that's not you. And I'm like, yeah, that is, it's pretty crazy. And now my singing pretty much has become, you know, me singing lullabies for my son, you know, when he goes to sleep on my shoulder, or my daughter and I in the car, or my wife is a phenomenal singer, so occasionally, you know, we get to sing together, which is kind of fun. But yeah, that chapter was obviously an amazing one, and also a tough one at the same time. But everything has led me to here, which is, you know, I wouldn't change anything.
What would you say was the highlights of your singing career? Because it was long, you did it quite a lot, and obviously the decision to leave wasn't taken, you know, lightly. So what would you
Yeah.
say was the highlights, and the biggest thing that you look back on?
It's interesting is that I, you know, the year that actually I kind of started to transition out of it, was such an it was such an awesome year. You know, my album that was when it was released on iTunes, and it was on the charts in Europe. And, you know, I got this tour that I was opening for two pretty well-known R&B artists, John B and Chico DeBarge, here in the United States. And, you know, so there were all these phenomenal things that were happening. And you know, it's funny, is like the highlight of you know, my career was definitely during that year, being on tour, and, you know, kind of seeing things take off. And then it was just kind of, you know, I felt like you know, the way my career went was, you know, it was one step forward and then all of a sudden it was three steps backwards. My management company went bankrupt.
Oh, wow.
The tour I was on after two cities went bankrupt.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
you know, yeah. So it was funny, is it, you know, it was just kind of like one of those things where, you know, you're at this high and things seem to be going incredibly well. I was invited to perform at some, you know, pre-awards parties and stuff for the MTV Music Video Awards in Las Vegas and this and that. Like there was all these great things happening. And then all of a sudden kind of the bottom fell out. So it was like, it was interesting because it was all in the same year that, you know, you had this, because like, oh man, finally, you know, it's like been doing this a while and I've had some success and, you know, but you know, they say in the entertainment industry, right? It's like it's it's not always about the talent, and it's a lot about luck and who you know, and obviously, you know, I felt like musically and songs and whatnot, you know, that you know that my stuff was probably as good as anyone's, and just at the end of the day, you know, there are so many unbelievable artists that kind of fall through the cracks, you know, and I can't tell you how many I've sung with over the years. So you're just like, you know, how is this person not a household name? But that's the way it is, you know. And so that was kind of it. It was this, you know, really, really amazing year. And then all of a sudden everything kind of, the bottom fell out, and, you know, and then that was a big wake up call. And I had to make a decision, you know, and the decision I made was like, I need to get I'm starting to become a really destructive person to myself. I'm starting to, you know, not like who I am as a human being. It's affecting my moods and my habits and all these different things. And I had to make a, you know, it was kind of like this epiphany. I had to make this life-changing decision. You know, it was like, I can continue down this path, which is taking me down a rabbit hole I don't want to go down, or I can, you know, I can kind of take command of my life. And so that's what I did, you know. And I was still, even after that, I was still involved in music for another probably 5 to 7 years. I did more so where I was just kind of a hired gun. I was singing for like big entertainment bands, but amazing stuff like, you know, these incredible bands that you would go to like a big event and you'd see, you know, a 12 to 14 piece band, or, you know, so we got to go and do the Red Cross Gala Ball in Monte Carlo and open for Joe Cocker at you know, and for the Prince of Monaco, we did we did Donald Trump's wedding at Mar-a-Lago. We did you know, the CEO of Reebok's 50th anniversary at his compound in Cape Cod. So I was still doing some really cool things. It just, you know, it was as I was kind of, you know, going more towards full-time fitness, and not, no, you know, so my original stuff, like the kind of the end of that was right around 2009, where I cut my last album, and I was like, you know, I was happy at that point. I felt some closure, and I was like, okay, I'm good. You know, I can kind of move on and do something else. So, yeah.
You went into personal training, coaching, and so on, obviously got certified, but there was a stint where you were also an athlete. You didn't just transition straight into the coaching, some of the biggest names in our sport. You also had your free time on the competition floor. Tell us about that. And obviously it was with your gym.
Yes, it was with Dynamics. It was great. I mean, it was so much fun, and it was cool. I got to do it with my wife, and you know, we were on our first team that represented CrossFit Dynamics, and we finished. I think, I can't remember. I think it was either 7th at regionals or 10th at regionals. It was top 10 though, and you know, what's funny is we had an amazing time, and I remember us walking off walking off the field and looking at each other and saying, this was amazing, and next year we have to make sure we have a lot better people doing it instead of us. And that's what we did. And the next year, my goal was, I want to make sure that that we get some athletes who are good enough that they beat me out, and we ended up, our team the next year came 5th at the games. So you know, it was great. I had a blast, but I was coaching heavily too. So I was was coaching and competing, and I knew, there was just no way to do both at a high level. I also, at that point, was, an older athlete in comparison, right? And had a history of injuries from basketball, and specifically a left knee I'd had 3 surgeries on. And so it just got to the point where I was like, this was fun, and I loved it. And I'm probably the most competitive human being in the world. So it really did satisfy that for me, and I got to feel it. But at that point I was like, it's time for me to focus on being a coach, and making sure that I can get my athletes to maximize their potential. And so that's kind of where it's been since then. But it was a blast. I loved it.
Talk to us about, going into personal training and then moving towards a more, full-time professional CrossFit coach, because it's such a young sport, and every single year that we see, new coaches, come onto the scene, and you've got really successful coaches that have more games athletes and so on. But tell us about your transition and who you looked up to and asked for advice to get to the point where you are now.
Yeah, it was cool. I mentioned that my buddy and I, really started training hard together back in like 2007, 2008, 2009, and we're coaching that class. And yeah, I started to personal train, but very quickly I got the CrossFit bug, and was coaching, most of my clients, all, functional fitness style, CrossFit style, in the CrossFit methodology. And, he was, his name is Steve Service, and phenomenal coach, and definitely a mentor, and someone who, I look back at it, we used to bounce ideas and workouts and programming off of. And, I think as a young CrossFit, it kind of like in the incipient stages of my career, really just geeking out on all the videos back in the day, and, watching all the OGs, from James Fitzgerald and Greg Admonson and all these guys, and Tommy Hackenbrook, who it's great, it's kind of amazing how it's come full circle. But now he's, one of our coaches at, who I'm working with at Underdogs Athletics. But yeah, it was a really cool time to get involved in CrossFit, where it was still, kind of, you had to sneak around the gym doing it, right? Like you were still dealing with these gym owners who felt the world was flat, and they looked at you like you were crazy. So, but I was lucky as a kid to have some amazing coaches in strength and conditioning. I've talked about it before, but I, as a high school athlete, as a kind of a premier high school athlete in my area, I was lucky enough to be able to work with the strength coach for the Miami Heat at the time. His name was Bill Ferran, and just an incredible coach. And that kind of really honed my skill and my interest in strength and conditioning and nutrition and all those things. And it was something that I just loved over the years. And then when I was able to devote the time to it, it was something that I wanted to learn about, and then something I wanted to get really good at. And I think, obviously with over the years, and experience, and just kind of trials and tribulations of doing things, I feel like it's something now that I've become pretty proficient at, and it's exciting kind of to see where the road has led us, and kind of where we're at now, and I'm just enjoying it.
So going from just coaching, getting addicted like all of us do when you get introduced to the sport, we're all addicted to this.
Yeah.
Who was your for our listeners and the people watching on YouTube, your very first big name on your books that you had the privilege of coaching and actually taking to the games? Tell us more about that athlete.
Yeah. So her name was Jessica Pananian. It was 2010, and Steve and I worked with. It was funny, she started coming to that Midnight Madness class that I was talking about back in the day. So that was the first athlete, that I was on the coaching staff of, that, we went to the games, and she finished fourth in 2010. And then very quickly after that, it was just a snowball effect. It was a athlete I used to coach. Her name was Kylie Claxton, who was on our 2013 and 2014 Dynamics Games teams. She was also a top 10 at regionals for a couple of years. Emily Friedman, who was an individual games athlete back in the day. And then, obviously we had some really phenomenal teams at Dynamics, with the likes of David Charbonneau and Chris Clyde, and then obviously in 16 with Christian Harris and Dr. Day and Andrea Ager, et cetera. So yeah, it all started back in when we started with Jessica in 2009, and then 2010 games, and then from there, pretty much just it was, like I said, I think the reputation around here kind of grew, and then we got a lot of athletes that started to come to Dynamics, and then obviously with Grid, and I coached Grid, which was phenomenal with the NPGL, and I got access to so many great athletes and coaches, and the Grid family was one that was really, really close, and was amazing at just building all these relationships within the sport. And some of my best friends are still from there. But it's been quite a journey. But that's kind of where it started.
I wanted to talk about Grid a bit later, but you mentioned it now. Not a lot of CrossFitters know about Grid. I'm talking at your average Joe CrossFitter. So here in South Africa, I mean, I come across on social media very, very not often. So talk to us about Grid, and it's kind of like this underground CrossFit movement, but it's not CrossFit. It's like, for lack of a better word, but it's like CrossFit on steroids, even if it's possible. I mean, if you look at what these Grid athletes are doing and what the games athletes are doing, you just can't compare. So talk to us about Grid, where it started. You were one of the founding fathers of of the movement and so on. And I don't know, it feels like there's like, do they look down on each other? Like, what is the feeling there?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, at the time, there was an adversarial relationship, and I think it stemmed from the fact that the founder of Grid, Tony Budding, was the media director of CrossFit, and I know Tony had gone to CrossFit and had this idea, and CrossFit turned it down, and then Tony went out on his own, and then of course there's a lot of ego, obviously with Greg back in the day, and listen, I think we all can tell Dave has an ego, and Tony had an ego, so they just clashed. I don't think that they had to be adversarial. Personally, I felt like there could have been a great relationship between the two, simply because the methodology that most Grid athletes are going to train in is still CrossFit. So it didn't make sense that to fight each other, but that's the way that it was. But Grid was cool, man. It was amazing. It's amazing to me to think that it's 7 years now. That was the first, 2014 was the first year of Grid. It really was popular here, on the national stage. Like, you had a lot of big name athletes doing it. Even though I think we learned very quickly that really good CrossFit athletes didn't necessarily make really good Grid athletes. There were only a few that were able to do both very well. But the majority of your best athletes were specialists. I always say it was like these incredible, stupid human tricks, right? It was just, it
is tricks. Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible to see. I still say that the Grid Combine in Las Vegas, which was in August-ish, I think it was August or June or August, July or August of 2014, is the greatest single collection of athletes that I've ever been in the same facility with for a week. And that includes the CrossFit Games.
Mm.
And that's not to say that they're the best CrossFitters. No, just athletes. Because you had the best of weightlifters, gymnasts, CrossFitters, track athletes. So you had all of these specialists that were in the same building, that were there to show off their talent, to get drafted. And it was wild. I mean, it was just incredible to see. There were things that you didn't even think were humanly possible that you were watching, So to be a coach in grid for a couple of years and obviously, be the winningest coach and win 2 championships. And, it was I really have nothing bad to say about it. It was an amazing, amazing experience. I think it was handled really badly on the business side, which is why it didn't succeed. There are small regional leagues now in the United States. The Florida Grid League is actually doing extremely well. And maybe, on the national stage, we'll see it come back at some point. But even if it never comes back, it was really a blast. And if people get a chance to watch some of the footage on YouTube, because it is on there, you can still.
It's crazy. It's insane. It's
absolutely wild and so much fun. It was a great experience as a coach. I felt like it was phenomenal for my coaching chops, especially on game day. It was incredibly cool for me to be able to, think outside the box, and to program outside the box. So that was a lot of fun. But the best part about it were the relationships. Like I said, I mean, the Grid family is one that was very close. The athletes that I had on the Brawlers, the DC Brawlers, are still like family. Most of them, came to my wedding, and a lot of the other team owners and coaches I'm still really close with. One of my best friends in the world was the owner and coach of the Boston Iron. One of my really close friends, and he actually came and competed on my team at Dynamics in 2016. Ian Berger was the GM of the Rhinos. So you have all these relationships and all these amazing experiences from those 3 years, that I'm so grateful for and so thankful for. It's like I said, as we go like year to year, as it gets further and further away from it, I sometimes will go back and just throw on a match and just watch, just to kind of feel the energy, because it is very different than what CrossFit is. It was like you said, it really was. It was this just high energy, 2 hours straight ahead, unbelievably entertaining, unbelievably fast, incredibly strategic. I loved the teamwork. It was cool, man. It was really cool. I enjoyed it.
For our listeners and the people watching that they don't know what grid is, you gave a great history about it now, but different to CrossFit, how did it work? I know there are still small leagues. The Florida League that you mentioned, I actually watched one of the athletes do the freestanding handstand push-ups, like she had a band, somebody was helping pulling it. It was insane. So just explain to us quickly, how did it work, how it still works, the smaller leagues, how it differs from CrossFit.
Sure. So grid essentially, it's on an actual like competition floor where you'll get a rig in the middle. That's got pull-up bars. It'll have ropes, it'll have rings, etc. And there's 2 sides to the court essentially, or to the grid, right? And you've got a start line and a finish line and 4 quadrants. So that essentially you've got to do work in each one of those quadrants. And there's a team. Generally, it's co-ed, although some of the races can be just men or just women, or it can be co-ed. And you've got to perform these tasks grid and whoever finishes that specific race first wins a certain amount of points. And at the end of usually 11 races, whoever has the most points wins. And so you've got two different teams, and you've got these phenomenal athletes performing these tasks, a lot of specialists, so who can do what they do really, really well. And there's very quick substitutions to get people on and off the floor. And it's your job as a coach to put the best plan together for each race. But what's really cool in grid is that it breaks down a lot. So you've got to be able to outthink the coach on the other side. So it's like a speed chess match, essentially, on game day. It's very exciting. It's very fast. It's cool because, each match will last at the most 2 hours. So, there's a lot of action. There's not a lot of downtime. So entertainment value wise, it's awesome. So yeah, that's basically a general description of it. And for people that don't really understand, even CrossFit, what they can understand is a race. So you understand that, like, the people on this side are beating the people on this side, because you can see that they're further along. And then when they finish, you can tell that they've won. So that's what's cool, is that, even though you may not know exactly what's going on, you can tell that it's a race, and you can tell that it's happening quickly, and that it's exciting. So yeah, that's my description of it.
The first thing that I noticed about grid when I saw it on social media and started researching is the things that, for example, one of the games athletes, Alex Smith, posts on his Instagram that he's just playing around, and people go like, holy hell, what are you doing? This is actual movements that the athletes do in the grid league. You see, the first time I saw Alex Smith do butterfly ring muscle ups, and doing ring muscle ups with a med ball between his legs, or doing handstand walks with a medicine ball between their legs, or doing a toes to bar, chest to bar in one movement. This is all things that people play around in their boxes, but the grid athletes do this as part of the competition.
Yeah. It's amazing. The stuff that they come up to is incredible, or stuff they come up with is incredible. And, I always used to laugh because, we would see these movements and you would think to yourself, oh, that's ridiculous. Like, no one can do that. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, somebody like Alex Smith, or on our team on the Brawlers, it was Ryan Elrod and Lindsay Maneri and then Alyssa Ritchie and Jessica Malone, like our bodyweight specialists. And you would give them these things, and they would get them, and within a couple of hours, they would have these, back roll to support, and up front uprises, and like you said, the triple touches with the toe to bar, chest to bar, bar muscle ups, and freestanding handstand push-ups, and all these different things that you would see, and it was incredible. But yeah, it's stuff that people play around with, but then they're actually doing it in competition, and generally doing it at a high level, because most of those athletes have a background in gymnastics, a high level background in gymnastics, and they can do it, and they can perform it with virtuosity, and that's the thing you just need to be careful of if you're watching it at home, right? Is that you see people doing it, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to do that. Well, no, you shouldn't do that, because they've been doing that since they were little. So, but yeah, the movements are amazing, and it really is cool to see some of the things that are. What I loved about it was that it kind of, pushed the level of human potential, right? Like, you could see things that you didn't think were possible on a daily basis. And that was really cool.
Were there any of those athletes that you, for instance, coached from the grid league that moved over to CrossFit when everything went down?
Yeah, I coached a bunch of athletes from grid. I think now, I think of anybody who's still involved. I think, there's several masters athletes that are obviously still involved in CrossFit. Most of your high level grid athletes, some of them had successful CrossFit careers, but there weren't a ton, right? Like if I think, I mean, Matt Frazier, obviously, I mean, he was on New York. Annie Thorsdottir was on New York. On our team at the time, in Marcus Hendren, who had a great CrossFit career, he's no longer in the sport. Ryan Elrod, who was our bodyweight specialist, who went on he won the Masters qualifier, unfortunately last year, and didn't get to compete at the games because of COVID. But there are a lot of grid athletes that did end up competing in CrossFit. Ron Ortiz obviously is one who's still doing it. Janet Black, Annie Sakamoto, who just won the games. She was on San Francisco. So you'll see a lot of those type of athletes. There's nobody right now who I still program for. I think Ryan was the last one, and he's taken a little break from the sport. Obviously in 2016, the games team that we had at Dynamics were all grid athletes. So it was Christian Harris, it was Dave Charbonneau, it was Ian Berger, Amy Dracup, who was on the Brawlers, Andrea Ager, who was on the Rhinos, and Becca Day, who was on the Brawlers. So it was a nice mix of grid athletes, and obviously we had a top 5 finish at the games. It was a successful team. But since then, I think it's less and less because we're getting further and further away from that 2016 season, which was that last season. Yeah.
Talk to us quickly about the training camps. It's becoming more and more popular, having training camps with a bunch of athletes, and what that looks like. Because from what we see on social media, it looks like these athletes train together every day, the whole day. They push each other, and that's how it goes. But it's not exactly how it works.
Yeah, when I'm asked about the training camps, the thing that I always talk about is how, it enables you to create an environment that you would never be able to create on your own, right? It allows you to be able to just constantly level up, but you're 100% right. It's not every single day. Otherwise you'd get burnt out. There's no way you could last through a season if you were just crushing each other every single day, right? So the athletes will settle into a schedule, and right now, especially, a lot of that is on their own, and their programming looks very different, and they're working on what they need to specifically work on. What I call kind of weakness work or GOAT work, right? As we get further into the season, especially after quarterfinals, towards semifinals, towards the games, they're training a lot more together. The ability to be able to push each other, the ability to be able to, do harder, more grunt work like workouts is definitely, I think there's misery loves company. So a lot of those workouts that I'll program that are mentally and physically, extremely taxing, doing it together is extremely beneficial. But right now, where we are at in the season, you'll see a lot of people who kind of settle into, 2 or 3 training partners, maybe at different times than some of the others. And as our camp grows, because it's growing, and I think we're probably going to be, this past year when Nicholas was there, we were generally like 6 athletes. And I think this coming year, especially come January, February, will be, 12, 15,
Wow.
Around there. So we're going to have more athletes. I think we'll see some people there'll be kind of different groups that'll be in at different times. And then as we get, like I said, my goal is weekly to have the athletes, do some things together 2 or 3 times a week, right? So Metcon 2 or 3 times, do some monostructural conditioning 2 or 3 times, just to, like I said, just to be able to level up a little bit. But yeah, no, it doesn't happen every day. It's not like they're battling every single day. as the season goes on, though, they will be together more and more for sure. But right now, I think there's a lot of individual work too.
If people want to become part of the Underdogs Athletics crew and find out about what you do and the rest of your team and so on, and join your programming, where can they follow you? Where can they get more information?
So they can go to Underdogs Athletics with an S, Underdogs with an S, right? On Instagram. They can go to underdogsathletics.com. That's very easy. They can go. We also are on Facebook, Underdogs Athletics. They can, if they come out to Vegas, they can obviously look us up. We're training currently at CrossFit Culmination South, but the goal is to have an Underdogs headquarters by the end of the year. Our goal is to open up our facility. So keep your fingers crossed. I think that's very close to happening, and that's going to be very exciting. And our goal then obviously would be to hold athlete camps, to hold coaches seminars, to hold a lot of really exciting things for the community. And we have some really exciting plans over the next several months. We have some new programs coming out. Our next program that'll be coming out is our Masters Competitors program. And that's going to be coming out at sometime in September, say towards the end of September. But we've got some incredible Masters athletes that I already work with who are collaborating with me on it. And I think it's going to be really, really exciting and special. So there's a lot of stuff, coming up. And I'm grateful. It's amazing, kind of what's happened. And we moved to Vegas and didn't really know what was going to happen. And obviously Kari coming with us, and then Bethany and Danielle moving out. And now we have this amazing athlete family that's here. And now this athlete family around the world that's growing. It's just awesome. I'm very grateful.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Just Elite. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and please, please, please leave a comment.